Evening, everybody. Thank you for joining this conversation today. In addition to the folks joining the webinar from home, we have the 25 members of our 2026 Dream Justice Advocacy Cohort joining us from our office in Oakland, along with a number of our staff. So welcome to that group, to Dream Justice participants. Congratulations on being part of the program. I look forward to meeting you in person later this weekend. And of course, a big thank you to our special guest and longtime leader in the movement space, Rashad Robinson. Rashad previously led Color of Change for nearly 14 years, transforming it from a startup into a national force for racial justice. He also led programs at GLAAD, reshaping media representations of LGBTQ people during the fights to win marriage equality. And through Rashad Robinson Advisors, he now collaborates with foundations, organizations, and leaders from across the country. The occasion for this conversation is Rashad has a new book out reflecting on his years fighting for justice titled From Presence to Power: How to Take on the Fights That Matter and Win. If you're a member of the Dream Justice cohort, you're getting a copy if you haven't already. And one last note before we get started, we are going to be having a Q&A about halfway through this conversation. So you can ask your questions using the Q&A feature or put your questions in the chat, and Tori will be calling on you later on. So that's going to be, again, about halfway through the conversation. So Rashad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Great. Well, we're going to go deep on a lot of topics. Love the book. But let's start with something basic. Your book is called From Presence to Power. So what is presence? What is power? And why are progressives often having trouble knowing the difference?
Presence is visibility, awareness. It's getting your issue on the front page of the paper. It's people sort of understanding it and being able to talk about it. Sometimes it's like your issue polling well. Presence is not a bad thing, but when we mistake presence for power, and power is the ability to change the rules, to make things happen that wouldn't otherwise happen, to make decision makers do things that they weren't planning on doing. When we mistake presence, which is the awareness, for power, which is the ability to change the rules, we get ourselves caught up into losses and other challenges. We oftentimes incentivize the wrong things in this era of the attention economy, meaning how many likes do you have, how many followers do you have, how many retweets. Like those things can be good, but those things oftentimes incentivized by donors, by the kind of world around us, can make us think that something has happened that hasn't actually happened.
Gotcha. So let's talk about how we build power instead of just merely having a presence. In the book, you give examples both from our sort of forebears, the civil rights movement. You also talk about the forces on the right that have done serious work building real structural power, the Heritage Foundation, ALEC. You have among the people watching this, you have a lot of Empathy Network leaders who maybe they just founded their 501(c)(3, they're running their first campaign. So they hear that kind of structural power and they're like, how am I supposed to build the power to take on that? So how does one start building power at the grassroots level to take on such powerful forces?
I love this question because I think we're sometimes caught in this trap of thinking, oh, I've got to take on Congress or I'm not going to do anything. Sometimes I hear people sometimes say, well, I don't want to, I'm going to sit back right now because I don't want to I don't want to put my body on the line. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of things you can do before putting your body on the line. And there's a lot of things you can do every day to move things forward. And so I mapped out 9 different exercises. So at the end of 9 of the chapters, there's exercises that are called Find Your Power. And Find Your Power are these tools for you to use, for the people that you're working with to use, that are about 2 different things for me. They're about finding your power in the singular. So, what do I bring to the table? How do I map and understand what my sort of contributions or the people I know or the networks I'm part of, the things I may not even be thinking about that could contribute and make something move forward that might just be how I go about my day. And I try to pose a set of questions that allow you to go through and really, in the singular, you yourself find your power. And then the second thing it does is it helps you find your power in the plural. because we all have to find our networks and our communities and the people around us that can make the sum total of our individual sort of efforts mean more. And so, to answer your question, there's a lot that each and every one of us can do. And this book is for the person who's like tired of seeing a world where we're losing things that we should be winning, that we're seeing the things that were once progress no longer sort of moving forward. And I just didn't want to talk about it. I want to give you tools to apply something new.
Yes, thank you. And it's true. At the end of every chapter, there's like a little worksheet. So yeah, you can definitely for people who work with us who are going through this program or have gone through the program in the past. I see some of our alums on the list of names here. A lot of you are working on campaigns, and you can just apply this theory to the real work that you're doing right now. Um, so at dream.org, as Rashad knows, and as a lot of you know, we really value being a common ground organization, working with unlikely allies that helps us secure durable wins in tough environments. So when I was reading your book, I had to ask about the Ken Melman anecdote. I'll give some context to this for folks who weren't following politics back in the aughts, but Ken Melman was one of the strategists and architects, really, of George Bush's reelection campaign, which relied in part on running some very homophobic ballot measures to juice conservative turnout. He then came out about 6 years later and became an ally to the equality movement. And in in the book, you write, I certainly realized that in that moment, building power isn't about purity. It's about creating ways for more and more people to join as time goes on. If it moves us towards our ultimate goals, even if I gave Ken a bit of side eye at the time, it's about addition, not subtraction. So I want to go deeper on the side eye. How do you, as an advocate, balance? You obviously have built a career on the values you have. So how do you balance holding on to those values, but also working with people who may not share a lot of your values, but can help you get wins that help our community in other ways?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that mix of wanting to win things and also being strategic that not everyone who comes over to our side is really on our side. How do you sort of monitor? And that's such a important. I'm glad you're the first person in the interviews I've been doing to bring up that story, and I love that story because he was the architect of so much. And it wasn't just that he ran George W. Bush's campaign for reelection and put all those anti gay ballot measures. It's that they built this really sort of robust black church strategy to go into black churches and use gay marriage to basically drive a wedge, right? And it wasn't just like driving wedge between gays and blacks. At the middle of it are black gay people who are now like, having to experience being, the targets all around. And then to see him like now openly gay, living his best life in New York, because of the culture and the strategies that so many of us created. But knowing that if we can like hold him to actually doing something different, he along the way can like perhaps move people. It doesn't mean that we let him lead the next pride parade. It doesn't mean that we give him awards. It means that we leverage what he has to bring to the table because our goal is to win and not just win an argument, to win actually real things that make people's lives better. And so yeah, I couldn't help but give him a side eye because I'm human.
Hmm.
I didn't like, I wasn't, overly nice, but he brought a perspective at the time that was useful, and you leverage that perspective to be useful. And at the end of the day, he's going to have to answer to his maker for all the things and all the ways that it showed up. But in the short time, my job as a strategist, my job as the person to go in and try to win things that are actually going to transform how people get to live means that I have to like sometimes put aside like maybe my personal feelings in service of winning the thing that's actually going to structurally change the situation.
That's great. And just to put a pin on the story, because I don't know the answers. So how did he help? I mean, I can guess ways in which he's very connected, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of information about where some of the tensions were in conservative spaces. We had to convince we had to build cultural arguments to convince conservative judges in some of the states. And he knew where some of the fault lines were. He
Mm,
also knew a lot of, after he came out, he knew a lot of conservative gays who had gay kids, some of whom might have been gay themselves. There were people that we could raise money from that were like wrestling with these issues in their own families or their own lives that we could bring into the table, right? Like, so how do you bring those people into the network? Desmond Meade from Florida oftentimes talks about how he had to leverage conservatives to get the amendment restoring voting rights
mhm.
to formerly incarcerated folks over the line to be able, and how many sort of white conservative returning citizens there were that he could engage with and talk to and move. And so our movements across the board have always had to figure out, how do we manage and navigate this? How do you get the thing over the line? It doesn't mean that I'm inviting everyone to the barbecue afterwards, but it does mean that if I actually want to have a celebratory barbecue, I may have to
Right,
build some relationships to get there.
right. You mentioned fundraising, so I feel like I have to throw this in there. Sort of the elephant in the room in the whole criminal justice movement and many others right now is how tough fundraising is, especially for
Yeah.
grassroots folks. And I mean, among your many skills, you were an elite fundraiser. So what's sort of your message to organizers who, they feel like I'm in the community, I'm connected to the community, but to build the infrastructure you're talking about, how am I supposed to reach? These sort of out of sight foundations or rich people. Like, what advice would you give to people in that space?
Yeah, the fundraising to me was always secondary. Although folks always, whenever folks tell me that I'm a great fundraiser, I always laugh because I'm a son of a tile contractor from Eastern Long Island who I didn't grow up around. I grew up around people with money who my dad did the tile work in their house, but not like networked around resources. And I think some of this is about how I approach strategy all around, how I approach what opening look like. So I grew up black in a community that was largely white. At some point in time, I realized that I was gay in a largely straight world. For folks that don't know me, I am 5'3". So I am short in a world where sometimes clothes are not designed for you, or sometimes the structures are not always set up for your ultimate success. And knowing that means that I never walk into a fundraising situation or a campaign situation or any others without trying to map my environment and understand sort of what do I have to do to get the thing I want out of the situation. I don't pick fights that I actually don't have a strategy for, because as a 5'3" person, you don't go out and threaten people because they might call you on it. And so you sort of learn along the way how to navigate sort of environments and structures. And that to me is how I approach fundraising. It is about creating sometimes an irresistible campaign or something that folks feel like they have no choice but to be part of it. You can keep them out. You're like, well, you sure you want to give to this? I didn't think that this was your lane. And you, oh no, it is our lane. And so you want people to feel like they want to give money. The criminal justice reform movement is, as someone who's been a leader in this work and has raised lots of money around this work, both work for elections around criminal justice for progressive prosecutors, work to force Democrats to be better on these issues, money around policy, millions and millions and millions of dollars over the years. And what I will say um, is happening right now is that our issues are not on people's radars as crisis the
Mm,
way that they were back in 2018, 2019, 2020. And when something is not a crisis, it becomes a lot harder for you to get people to engage. We are in a crisis of other things that people care about right now. And so the question is how do you align criminal justice to the current crisis that people are actually experiencing? And so, as I think about it, people are experiencing a crisis of corruption, a crisis with authoritarianism in the rule of law, a crisis with these things. So, how do you deal with the corruption of a criminal justice system and take it from a different lane? Some of the messaging and the narrative that we are deploying right now to raise money around criminal justice is the messaging and the narrative that worked during a time where people were seeing viral videos all the time, and they were getting data all the time. And some of the data that was like most compelling has changed a bit. Some of the ways in which the algorithm works means that we're not seeing as many viral videos, and it's not capturing our attention. And so then what are the things that are capturing people's attention? How do I connect the thing that I'm trying to move as a way to solve the problems that are currently on people's plates? And I do think that that is how, in some ways, you capture people's energy. There will be ebbs and flows to everything that we do. There will be times where we are on the front page, we are deeply present, and there are times where we are not present. But the long-term way is to make sure that you're really listening to the environment and you're connecting what's happening in the world to ways that people can engage. And so from a criminal justice perspective, I think about this a lot. And I've like told this to another number of people who have reached out to me who are funders, and because my advisory does work with folks to try to help them think about narrative, I continue to think that there is a role for criminal justice advocates to play in both electorally, culturally, and in this work around shaping this moment, because we will also be heading into an accountability phase heading after the 26th election and hopefully after the 28th election. And this accountability phase actually has to look different than other accountability phases, right? And so the criminal justice movement also has something to offer in terms of not making us believe that everything is about criminalization, that criminalization will solve all of our problems, that there are ways to have a society of consequences and rewards, but a society that is not solely centered on punishment. And how do you do those things that is satisfying to the public and shows a leadership from the justice system that does all the other things that we want to do? I think there's opportunities there, and I think that that's how I would sort of approach it, even while you're in a moment in time where you're out of the maybe public spotlight. That will allow you to prepare and build for the times where you're back in the spotlight. And when you're back in the spotlight, what did we do wrong the last time? Or what did we not get as right as we could have? And being honest about those things, as I'm honest about them in the book. I talk about the bail reform work. Like, where did we make missteps? Because I think that that also helps us when we go back to donors for those next big checks, that we're honest about where we would make changes.
That answer took me in a couple places. I have follow-ups on several points you made there. But one of them is, you brought up the midterms, and for people who are involved with our org, our C4 Rebuild the Dream is definitely going to be doing some work in the midterms. So stay tuned for that. If you're in one of the battleground states, especially. But we talked earlier about common ground, working with conservatives, Republicans. This is sort of this question is sort of the flip side of that, which is, how does an activist not get trapped in the sort of Democratic bubble, right? Because there are definitely, I think on issues like criminal justice, LGBTQ rights, generally Democrats, are better than Republicans. There are exceptions. Obviously, in this administration, there's no contest. But there's also many Democrats, consultants, politicians who would rather not be talking about criminal justice, would rather not be talking about trans rights. So how have you in your career sort of navigated that tension of wanting to be, an effective advocate, while also recognizing that, it's even within the Democratic Party these can be hostile issues to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I've oftentimes worked on issues that when started were sort of intractable, right? I got to GLAD in 2005, and that wasn't like the greatest time to,
Right.
work on marriage equality, or non-discrimination or trans acceptance or any of those issues, right? 2004 which was the Democratic, when John Kerry lost that year, and we just talked about Ken Melman. But 2004 was also like just followed 2003, which when Massachusetts started marrying couples. And if you remember, for those people that sort of remember that era, there was a huge backlash in the Democratic Party that, culminated in a bunch of people sort of really being uninvited to the DNC convention. Gavin Newsom, who's, like not considered liberal or lefty, progressive by a lot of people, was uninvited to speak at the Democratic convention because of his positions on gay marriage, right? That was a different era. And I think I talk a lot about this in terms of narrative. Our job when we are sort of in the wilderness on an issue is to change the water and to change the air, to change the belief system. And so that's not messaging. That's creating experiences. That's using tactics and stories that help people understand who the people we're fighting for really are, to create new conditions, for corporations or others who are enabling the injustice, to create benefits and rewards in society. So I think that there's always work, because sometimes you are working on an issue that, overnight you're not going to be ready to win a ballot measure, or overnight the legislation is not going to go through. You don't only want to take on issues that are like ready to like win tomorrow, because sometimes the people you want to fight for, the things you want to fight for, are a little bit sort of out of the mainstream, and you want to take on those fights. But then how do you take on those fights? How do you build up enough energy so you're not just loud, you're not just like beating at doors that are not ready to open, but that you're building the space and the energy? The best things some of the best moments that I've had is like being like out in the wilderness. I remember on private prison money, and I really wanted to make it a litmus test for Democrats. You can't take private prison money and, run for president or run for office. And we started, with DAs, and we were working our way up. And by the time we got to 2016, we had gotten into the Democratic primary, and we got Bernie Sanders to say he wasn't going to take private prison money. And we were going back and forth with the Hillary Clinton campaign. And we, while we were doing it, we were like announcing all these other folks that weren't going to take it. And in these moments, you're like, we want to create a new standard, because then you can go to the next thing, a new rule. And Hillary was like, kind of playing at both sides with us for a while. And I remember we sent her two emails. And these are emails that were going to go out to all of the Color of Change members. One email had a happy Hillary face saying that she had changed her position and she was no longer going to take private prison money, and she was giving back the money. And we talked about how important it was, because this meant that the things that she was saying about criminal justice could mean something. And the other email we sent her was an angry Hillary Clinton picture on it, and it said that she was taking private prison money while telling us that she was going to fight for criminal justice reform. And we said, you get to pick which email we send at the end of the week. We will send one of these, and depending on your position, you get to pick. How beautiful is that? And I remember the campaign calling us and like, this is outrageous. Like, you're threatening
It's very
us.
clever, very creative. I like
This
it.
is blackmail. I'm like, whatever. I'm a black male, so let's move forward. And but this is what will happen. And donors called. This is what's going to happen. We sent out, Hillary Clinton changed her position, and we sent out the Happy Hillary email. By the time we got to the Democratic primaries of 2020, all of the candidates were not taking private prison money. One of the chief strategists inside of one of the campaigns, who had been working on the Hillary Clinton campaign, called me and said, "Oh yeah, do you remember when we worked together to make sure that private prison money, that no one could take private prison money?" Now, I don't quite remember working with this person I remember this person being really angry with me. And I said, yep, I do remember that. I hope you feel really proud of the work that you did to move us forward. This is your issue as much as it is mine. So I hope that you go out and you talk about when you helped to make private prison money a non-starter, because that is also, once again, part of this work. That the more people we can see as championing and holding on to the things that we win, the more people we will have fighting for them and
Mm.
hopefully fighting for the next thing. Because ending private prison donations doesn't mean that any private prisons close, right? It just means that you create less people that are indebted to them and you're closer to a strategy of moving things forward. But it's one type of momentum achievement. But that story I hope shapes sort of an answer to your question. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And it's a reminder that, in campaigns, I know you're a big Bayard Rustin fan. He's mentioned in the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
I usually have
I
this on
see.
my
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
I usually have it on my sidewall, but for you, I brought it down.
I love it.
But it's all about being creative and clever sometimes to really drill that point home. If yelling is not enough, right? Like you've got to.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
all right, so I have one more question for now, and then we're going to go live to Oakland. And so, Tori, get ready for me to come towards you. But my last question, you touched on this a little bit before, which is around the durability of wins and sort of when to go on offense and when to go on defense. And so I really like this passage of the book, so I'll just read two sentences from it. In particular, we cannot depend on having the wind at our back to believe that achieving power is possible. Being effective means playing offense and defense constantly. It means never thinking that the momentum we have achieved cannot turn on us, but it also means never thinking that the forces stacked against us make our work hopeless. I like that passage. It's sort of a classic, don't get too high, don't get too low,
Yeah.
because, winds shift so fast in politics, even faster than they ever used to, I think, right? In both directions. And
Yeah.
you mentioned bail reform. I was very involved in the bail reform fight in New York, and it's
Yes.
a historic win, best bail policy in the country. Um, but the durability of that win was really hammered by the fact that the forces we went up against and beat, Prosecutors Association, bail
Yeah.
bonds companies, they're still around. And every year they come back and they try to chip away, they try to overturn it, and there still are this year, 7 years later. And it's just a reminder that even in our proudest wins, we have to keep fighting for it. And likewise, when we think, when I was running the Close Rikers campaign, we were told optimistically maybe you'll get that win in 3 years, and we got the mayor to commit within 18 months. And I don't think that was just because of us. I think we live in an environment where the winds shift quickly, and if you're ready, you can really capitalize on them.
Absolutely.
So I was hoping you could talk for a minute about just how do you think about the durability of wins, knowing that so many of the times when we do win, there are forces that would rather like to repeal it the very next year.
Well, I start the book talking about how much the right wing has changed how politics works because I think that helps us situate ourselves in the environment that we're in really well, right? They have created this environment where everyone can participate, where everyone is engaged and they're on the field, right? Sometimes you go to the gym and people will be turning the channel to Fox News. People wear their red caps. They're creating an environment where folks are wearing their jerseys. And sometimes on our side, we can almost treat it like theater or professional sports. The athletes are on the court or on the field. We are watching the play from the audience, but you're not on the stage yourself. And so, when I think about creating durable wins, that means that we have to get more of us invested in seeing that win as part of our lifestyle, part of our engagement, part of what we talk about, and how we don't think about a win as the end of the process. Our opponents, and I've been saying this a lot in my interviews, our opponents um, never really say when we win. But we kind of do a lot on our side. We say when we win and we talk about this magical world. And they don't talk about it. So if you watch Marvel or you like an action movie, going up and against an opponent that never thinks the war is over, but you think the war is over, is like a really messy battle to get yourself in because you're fighting someone that's never going to give up. And that from my perspective, is a real challenge that we have on our side and makes some of our wins not as durable as they should be. Because it's not just that you can win something as landmark as the voting rights. You have to know that our opponents are going to take the next 40, 50, 60 years to work to dismantle it. And they're going to put infrastructure plays after infrastructure plays to dismantle it and drag us backwards. Our job is to not win something to defend it. Our job is to win something to advance it. Because that is both an effort of defense and an effort of recognizing that what we won in those moments was a compromise. What we won was the most that we could win with the power that we had. And if you recognize that, then you think differently about what comes next. And that's one of the offerings of the book that I think is really important for us to sort of rewire how we think about wins and losses, to rewire how we think about social change as a lifestyle, as a sort of way in which we show up each and every day, believing that something new is possible and we're willing to do something for it. And so um, I offer many moments where there's wins only for us to see it chipped away and lost, because I think that that's instructive for all of us, because we will have more wins. And when we have those wins, we should be ready to do the work to defend them and to advance them, to do the work to make them as durable as possible, to do the work to make sure they actually get implemented in the first place and they get enforced and that they work. Sometimes we could get a win and it might not actually work. It might not actually do the things or be as valuable in ways to people's lives as we thought it was. And we have to also live in an environment where we can be honest about that, because sometimes the incentives of fundraising and how the nonprofit industry works is that we have to have ribbon cutting ceremonies for buildings that nobody wants to go inside of. And let's find a way to create a culture that's more honest about these things, because if we are more honest about these things, I actually believe that the true wins we'll get will have people feel more connected to us, feel more willing to fight alongside us, feel more willing to take risk because we ask them to or we invite them into those risks.
And if you're listening to that and you're like, that sounds pretty daunting, man. We got to win the thing, then we got to defend it, and then we got to keep going and going and going. This is why when we do our trainings around organizing, we say organizing is so much about building up leadership in others, right? It doesn't have to be just you with your campaign that you started and now, you have to do it for the rest of your life 24/7, right? Like we're always trying to build more leaders so that other people can pick up that mantle, grab the baton and move this forward, because it is a multi-generational fight. Um, Tori, let's how we handle it? Is somebody gonna come up to the computer?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna open it up for anybody to ask any questions. I do want to say in the background here we had people laughing and engaging. It was fun in the audience, but oh, yep, come on over here.
And for other folks, we'll turn to the chat soon enough.
Hmm. You can say your name as well.
Hey,
Here.
Brian Meaton. Thank you for the book, by the way.
Right.
I just had a question. So I am a scriptwriter and a playwright.
Uh-huh.
And as far as while trying to navigate representation for the community, because I do like the work that you do with GLAAD also, and how important changing hearts and minds was, and the work that GLAAD did, and changing also hearts and minds for policy is
Yes.
effective. But how do we do that in a landscape where media is being bought up by people that are not necessarily as friendly to us
Yeah.
in an ethical way?
Yeah. So first, we have to fight these media mergers, and I think so. I work really closely. I'm the co-chair of the Committee for the First Amendment, which is the organization founded by Jane Fonda, who's actually moderating my first book talk in New York, and we've been trying to mobilize as much of the Hollywood industry to push on attorney generals to engage in the fight. And so it's about finding the right levers, right? And Congress or the FCC are not going to be the places to stop those mergers, but the place to stop them is going to be these AGs. And pushing attorney generals to think about sort of justice and crime differently than some of the ways in which they think about it. And sometimes I think it's a real opportunity to create a new standard for those that want our votes for attorney generals, to hold accountable big business. And so that's one area. There's a whole chapter in the book about taking on Hollywood. So I'm really excited once you get a chance to dig in to read it. I don't just talk about the work at GLAAD. I talk about the work at Color of Change to take on crime procedural shows, right? You can't take on the criminal justice. No op-ed piece is as powerful as Law and Order, right? And on our side, we have very powerful tools like that have been really useful. I've also engaged directly and taken myself into that world. So I've been in probably over, 3 dozen writers' rooms of some of the top crime TV shows to go in and help them push. I've also ran campaigns against them. I also then worked really closely with Ryan Murphy on the Dahmer series on Netflix. And when he called me to do that after I'd been doing trainings with the Writers Guild, um, I was like, okay, this is interesting. More people will see this thing than maybe anything else I've ever touched. And they gave me the opportunity to go into each episode and shape how police would really engage. What really happened? Why did this blonde hair, blue eye guy get away with killing mostly all these men of color? And how did that work? But also, how did the activism work that pushed back? Being able to help shape that Jesse Jackson really did show up to Milwaukee during 1989, during the height of his power. What would that have looked like for a community? What would it look like for the black gay folks in that community pushing back? That they weren't just portrayed as victims, but also were portrayed as having agency in a time where it was just dangerous being who you are. And so there is so much potential in how we create these stories. And there are a lot of platforms for us to do it. So I think the difference between being present and powerful is both understanding the rules, right? So it's like the same way we tell people to vote, we also have to fight for voting rights. The same way we tell folks, maybe like you, that we have to get the right content on the air, we have to fight for the rules of how that content is distributed. We have to make sure that we are sort of focused on it. And those are two separate things. So fighting for the rules of the internet, fighting for regulation of big tech, like making sure that the algorithms are transparent. These are all things that have to be part of our work, so that we win things that are valuable. But I also think that those who are storytellers and writers and scriptwriters can be so useful on the issues they care about outside of just writing for TV. We need creative people to help us tell stories in our movement, because most movement organizers are not funny, even though they may think they are. They're not creative the way that they think they are. And this is not a knock at my people. We are great at a lot of different things. But it is nice when you have an artist that can come in and help you create art that reaches new people. And I've always benefited over the time from being able to send something to someone whose job it is to reach people in a different way and say, can you make this sound less like us and more like people who would turn on the TV and perhaps have a different opinion about what we're working on. So if you can offer that to people and also bring people into that journey, that's just another way where I think you can be of help. Yeah.
Thank you. I will see you in the book signing in New York.
Yes. Can't wait. Yes.
Awesome. Tori, do we have a second person there, or do you want to go to the chat?
We got someone coming up. Oh, here.
Hi, Rashad. My name's Venus. I just had a quick question real quick. Um, so for doing the work for decades and all the other things that are going on, um, what do you do to, you know what I mean? Like to re-energize
Yeah.
yourself or to,
Yeah.
to stay, you
Yeah.
know, because I know it's been a really tough, the last year, especially. I run
Yeah.
a aid service organization in Alaska, and
Oof. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So do you have any tips for those of us that, haven't been doing the
Yeah.
work as long?
So yeah, everyone is different. Everyone gets recharged differently, and having worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people over the years in different capacities in different ways, whether I was inside of organizations with them or in movement spaces or whatever, I know that everyone's got their own thing, and what works for me may not work for other folks. Um, I am energized by the work, and I know that that may sound weirdly cliche, but I feel like if I was waking up, seeing what's happening in the world and didn't have something to do about it, that would mess me up. Like I would like need therapy. So I feel uniquely blessed that I have a vehicle and an outlet for the things that I do. But I also like love other things about the world that are not, so like my love of TV can sometimes trickle into my activist world. I love cooking. I try to keep that out of my activist world, although it trickles in sometimes too, because I end up finding myself cooking for a lot of people that like, you know, in strategy space. But I do find the things that are creative outlets for myself, and the things that allow me to take a breath. For most of the things that we're working on, and particularly, especially for the issues that you're working on, you are not going to solve it tomorrow if you just put another hour. Like, the problem is not going to go away if you, like, just wake up on Saturday and Sunday and do more. And so balancing that with the fact that there are days that some things are just urgent as a leader. Some things you just have to get over the line. And as the leader, many people will never know. It can be very lonely. It is so lonely sometimes to be the leader of a project where real people's lives are at stake and real ups and downs, life and death things are happening. So I first just want you to know that like I feel that and I see you. And that most people will never know like why you're doing so much or what's at stake or what's behind that. And so I think that this room that you're in is so important because part of why in the Find Your Power section I talk about Find Your People is because that's also an outlet. Because we are unique. Like what we've decided to do and how we've decided to like dedicate our lives, that's not everybody. Everybody's not going to bring that same energy. Just like everyone is not going to spend as much time as a professional basketball player on the court. They're going to play every once in a while, but then they're not going to spend all their time in the gym and then watching videos and going over plays. Like they're just not. You all are engaging in this work at an elite level. So you need to find ways to take care of yourself. But part of the way you can take care of yourself is being networked with other people who are facing those similar battles, who can see you and feel you and know that like, you know, I know that I may not know all the details of what you are facing with these horrendous cutbacks to sort of AIDS delivery services. But what I do know is that across the board, the profiteers are winning, and across the board, the right wing and MAGA are winning on a lot of these places. And in a place like Alaska, it's got to be an uphill battle. And so I see you, I know what you're up against, I have a little bit of opinion about it, and how do we talk about how do we stay in the fight long enough so that we can get to the other side and still be ready to like perhaps reap some of the rewards of our wins.
Thank you. One just follow-up comment real
Yeah.
quick. Your energy is intoxicating and I love it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw a lot of head nods, a lot of yes, we get it. I see one question in the chat, and I will answer it at the end because it's about our work and I have ways to get involved. But we have our next one up is Aaron.
I had to retool mine a little bit because I was actually going to ask you how you kept fresh with the, because some of this can be very challenging work, obviously. So she kind of took that question, but I guess that I will retool and ask, if there's like one thing that, as far as like tools are concerned that you remember in everything that you do, that you could tell every one of us that grounds you in everything, what would that be?
Um, wow. There's never just one thing. I do try to remind myself to breathe a lot. I can go a mile a minute, and I do think that sometimes taking a breath allows you to make better decisions and allows you to maybe, not take your very first instinct. There is something I think about in like the storytelling space, in the sort of vision space, is that I just remember one thing I remember when I'm thinking about communicating is that a vision has to have a couple of really clear parts, and it has to have a story that has a villain and has a hero, and that like that may seem simple, but far too often we construct stories that like don't have a real villain and don't have a real hero, and people can't understand it. That it has to make sense, right? And what I mean by make sense is that you know like there's something in PR called the brother-in-law test. Like you have to be able to say it to someone who's not doing the work every day that you're doing. And they have to understand what you mean. And I try to remember that because once we go deep on some of our issues, we become experts. And when you become an expert, you want to show your expertise. And showing your expertise is not always helpful to getting more people to actually caring about the thing. And so I know a lot about the criminal justice system, but that doesn't always mean knowing a lot about it is useful as a communication strategy. Now, it's useful at knowing the difference between a real solution and a fake solution. And knowing enough about it is helpful, but that's a behind the scenes thing, not a public engagement thing. You have to have enough money, resources, time, capacity, or energy. One of those things to see it through. And what I mean by that is that lots of times, and I see it more than ever in this current environment, I will see us picking fights that we're not ready to spend time on. Like, a lot of this happens in the corporate accountability space where folks say, we're going to go after this corporation. And I'm like, you're going to go after this multinational corporation for a week with a couple of tweets? Like, you're not serious. Maybe this goes back to me being 5'3" again and me like knowing that like if you pick a fight with a big target, you should prepare yourself for that target fighting back. And you should prepare yourself for being ready to actually engage. So those are some of the things that I think about because, part of all of this work is sort of using what we have to be able to get as much as we possibly can along the way. So that taking that breath, understanding the sort of power of story, making sure that it makes sense, and making sure that you can see it through, I think are really sort of just important steps.
Thanks very much. That's exactly the type of something I'm looking for.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, we got another question coming up.
How you doing, Rashad?
Well, good to see you.
Thank you for the work you do too, brother.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, I've actually written to you when you were at Color of Change, and then after I read about you in Emily Bazelon's book, I wrote to you again.
Okay.
Um, while I was
I didn't
inside.
see that. I hope it was okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
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 This is so years ago.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you, have you ever done any work abroad, like in the continent, anything like that?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Uh, First of all, I think that sometimes the work to get US corporations right about especially in the tech space and in the Hollywood space, is doing work abroad because of how much gets exported overseas. So sometimes I focus on that. How I think about my work abroad is over the years, I get outreach from folks all over the place. Lots of times over the last several years through racial justice work, it's been activists um, in countries where black folks are minorities and people are trying to build sort of power. And so that's less on the continent and more in places like Europe and South America where like people are fighting anti-black racism and they are looking at some of the strategies that have been deployed and they want help. Where I've engaged on the continent has been particularly with queer activists who are oftentimes dealing directly, once again, with the impact of structures in the US. So a lot of the anti-gay legislation is coming from white evangelical conservatives who are sort of exporting those policies overseas. There's like some great documentaries on what they've done in Uganda and some of these other countries, not bringing any resources, not bringing help for anything, but bringing sort of laws and bringing outrage and attacks from, against black queer people in those countries. And so I've worked with and engaged with and found support for and done fundraising for some of those folks. It is something that I'm hoping to do more of. I'm also interested as I go out in this book tour of what things work and don't work in other places, hearing from people. I think I'm going to learn a lot, right? My book was unapologetically written through a US frame. And I say unapologetically because I think my grandmother used to always say, help begins at home. Like, don't go out talking about somebody else's house. Get your own self right first. And I think like that's my focus. But I also think that we live in a world that's increasingly connected, and we've got to find the ways to be of service. And so I'm speaking at the International Fundraising Conference, which in October, which actually has a lot of people from Africa attending who are battling right now the impacts of what's happened with USAID. So our elections continue to result. USAID got cut, and now you're seeing AIDS research funding overseas, all sorts of things being cut. And they're interested in a different way to think about what's next. And the idea from presence to power was something. And so I'm going to be keynoting the close of their conference. And my hope is like finding other ways where I could be of service and value that are the right ways, because I don't want to go places and think I know things that are not useful.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Bryan. I never introduced
myself. All right.
Thank you
Pleasure.
for what you do.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Tori, we probably have time for one more, or if there isn't one, then I can ask.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions. So you can go ahead and close. We do have a question about getting involved in advocacy work with Dreams. So if you want to.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask one more question of Rashad.
Okay.
One of the themes in your book is needing to stay innovative in how you approach campaigns, as as the world evolves. And for folks who don't remember, Color of Change really was a pioneer in this sort of mass mobilization using email and online petitions. I was wondering what you think here in 2026, middle of Trump's second term, what are ways that you think the movement needs to keep evolving in a sort of strategic way to sort of match how society is changing? That's kind of a big question for 2 minutes, but just would love to get
it's a big question for 2 minutes, but I'll say a couple of things. One, I think we moved from the mass kind of outreach, even how people are engaging in Signal threads and WhatsApp threads. So we've moved from almost the town square to house parties. And how do we network the kind of digital house parties in ways that are sort of meaningful for folks? And so I've been thinking a lot about that and how that gives more of us as nodes power to reach people. When there's one organization controlling email outreach for 10 million people, that's different than lots of us having. And how do you network those folks? And that's going to be different. And it means more trusted relationships. And it looks different. I think our media platforms have changed at the same time, right? People follow people, not just organizations. And so creating brands and identities, I think about my friend Don Lemon, who I used to fight with a lot when he was on CNN, who's now almost become a different person in some ways on some of the politics, but is so much more trusted, so much more engaged on his platform. It's interesting. And Joy Reid, too, having way more freedom on MSNBC than she had on MSNBC. And so we're in a different age of information and sharing. And one of the things that I talk about a lot, and then I'll turn it back over, is that the right wing has built such an infrastructure for getting their ideas out, for helping people sort of like capture their ideas and move them into the world. And whether that's with books or podcasts or whatever. And so the one sort of ask as I leave is that this book is taking on corporations and corporate power. So it's going to be hard for me to get on a lot of corporate media outlets to sell the book because I didn't shy away from talking about the mergers or talking about some of these challenges. And so without people sort of sharing this book, sharing the ideas of it, it could get suppressed, right? Like Amazon doesn't love me because I've taken on fights with Amazon. And so I need my people to like tweet about the book, to uplift it on IG and TikTok, to tell their friends and family about it and send it around. And you know, you all have a free book, so tell someone else to get one or get one and share it with someone else because that's going to help these ideas reach the masses. It's also going to send the message, as much as this is an awful thing in the world of capitalism, it's going to send the message to bookstores that they should carry it. So that when someone's randomly walking by the shelves, they see this book as an opportunity for them to learn something new. So I need that. We all need that because we also want more people to be able to write books about taking on corporate power, taking on the criminal justice system, and be able to do it with Random House. And Random House will be looking at how well this book does. And they'll be able to send a message, well, you know, like we get it about taking on corporate power, but we're a corporation and we may not want people doing it. And so that's the invitation, is that I'm treating this book as an innovative campaign, as an innovative campaign to get ideas out in the world. And I hope you all will join me on that journey as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's an invitation. It's also a call to action in organizer parlance. You know,
Yes.
the call to action has been made. Please share share the ideas of the book, share the book, do book parties when you get home from the retreat. I'm sorry, from the training. And of course, we will also be distributing it, just so you know, Rashad, a lot of our staff for our staff retreat
Oh,
in a
great.
couple of weeks.
Great.
So there'll be more of us reading it for sure. So I'm going to close out just by giving a few ways people can get involved. Then we'll thank you for your time. So Tori's going to put in the chat a couple of links. One of them is to our Serious About Safety campaign, which is how we are making sure that the Trump administration and this Congress does not run roughshod over criminal justice reform in the final months of this term, and we can get ready for next year when hopefully we have a better Congress to work with. So no matter where you are in the country, it's a federal campaign, so everyone can get involved in that. Tori's also going to share a link to support our Dream Justice cohort. This is the 6th year now we've been running it, and it's how we train the leaders of the future leaders of the criminal justice reform movement. So if you can support, please do. And then lastly, I'll ask people if they can come off mute. Actually, can they come off mute by themselves?
Yeah,
Let
they
me
can.
see. Okay, great. So come off mute and please give a round of applause to Rashad for great conversation today. I think that they might have been muted.
Yes, it's all right. It's all right.
But
Thank you all. Thank you all.
I'm
So
sure
much
you feel the
appreciation and
love.
love. Yes. Yes, so much appreciation and love, and I hope you all. Oh, it's good to see everybody. I hope that for everyone that's in the room, if I see you out in the world, please come and say hi and let me know you were in the room because can't really see faces, but hopefully folks will take the message, take the book out into the world. But thank you all, and thank you all for what you're doing. Um, you know, we need all of us in this moment. So thank you, thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Take care. Have a great night, Rashad, and great night, everybody else.
Bye.
Thank you.